The first time he saw her, he was late. Not the kind of late that meant 5 minutes behind schedule or a misstep in his color-coded calendar. No, this was the kind of late that made his assistant, Camille, trail him through the marble-floored lobby of Calder and Blake with an iPad in hand and a look of quiet terror on her face. "Mr. Drake, you have the sit-down with the Dwyer account in 11. Madison's violin instructor is waiting in the conference room, and—" "I need someone to pick up Ava," Nathan Drake cut in, tapping the elevator button with a sharp flick. "That was the plan. Where's the sitter you said you'd schedule?" "I did, she's downstairs in security. They needed clearance." Camille followed him inside the elevator, her sleek heels barely making a sound. "She's a last-minute replacement. The agency sent her file." He looked down at the screen Camille handed him, barely registering the profile photo. Young woman, early 30s, brown eyes, ordinary resume, experience with children, nothing jumped out. "Fine, just send her up. I don't want Ava waiting." He said it like it was an order, not a concern. But in the hollow behind his stern tone, there was a hitch, one Camille caught but didn't comment on. That was Nathan Drake, CEO of Calder and Blake, Manhattan's most unflinching M&A firm. A man who made seven-figure decisions before lunch but hadn't figured out how to braid his daughter's hair. The elevator opened again and Camille peeled off. Nathan walked briskly toward his glass-walled office, pausing only when he saw them. Through the haze of mid-morning chaos, Ava was there, sitting on the brown leather couch, her knees tucked up under her chin, ballet flats dangling. And beside her, the woman. She stood when he entered, as if instinctively aware of how much space he commanded just by walking into a room. There was something disarming about her, something that made Nathan pause for a fraction of a second longer than usual. She didn't smile too quickly. She didn't offer some chirpy greeting. She looked at him, really looked. "I'm Emery," she said, voice soft but sure, "from the agency." He gave a clipped nod, eyes flicking between her and Ava. "You've been briefed." "I've spoken with Camille. Ava's school ends at 3, she has a peanut allergy, and she hates lima beans." His brow arched. "You remembered all that." "Of course," she said, without blinking. Ava was watching her too, not with distrust, no, that had passed. Now it was something more curious, like she couldn't quite figure this woman out, like maybe, finally, someone wasn't trying too hard. Nathan didn't have time to dwell on it. He signed a couple of consent forms, gave her access credentials, and excused himself to the Dwyer meeting. As he disappeared down the hallway, Emery looked back at Ava. "You okay with this?" Ava shrugged. "You're not what I expected." Emery smiled then, just a little. "Neither are you." By the third day she knew where the spare house key was kept. By the fifth, Ava let her tie her hair into a ponytail without flinching. By the end of the second week, she knew that Ava loved mangoes, liked swimming but not diving, and that she still cried sometimes when she thought no one was listening, always at night, always after her dad's voice came through the phone and not in person. Nathan didn't talk much to Emery. He wasn't rude, not really, just distant, polite in a way that felt practiced. He asked questions about Ava's schedule, checked that homework was being done, and paid her weekly without delay. He wore suits like armor and spoke with the clipped certainty of someone who didn't have time for small talk. But Emery noticed things. She noticed the way his eyes softened when Ava ran into his office after school. She noticed how he kept her drawings pinned behind his desk where no clients could see. She noticed the pictures that were missing, no family photos on his desk, no wedding rings, no dusty keepsakes, just space. She also noticed the quiet. Evenings were silent in the penthouse. Once Ava was in bed, Emery would sit for a while on the velvet armchair by the window, watching the city bleed into night. Occasionally, she'd hear Nathan in the study, papers shuffling, the sound of ice clinking in a glass, the rustle of a tired sigh. Then one Thursday, it shifted. Ava had been unusually quiet. She clung to Emery's hand all afternoon and refused to eat much at dinner. When Nathan came home, she didn't run to him. "She okay?" he asked, pausing at the edge of the kitchen island. Emery hesitated. "She misses you." His jaw flexed. "I see her every day." "She doesn't measure time like you do." He looked at her then, not at her resume, not at her references, but at her. Really looked. and for a second he didn't have anything to say. That night she found him on the balcony. She hadn't meant to intrude. She was looking for her sweater and didn't expect him to be out there, shirt sleeves rolled up, staring down at the city like it had betrayed him. "She's tougher than she looks," Emery said quietly, "but she's still just a kid." Nathan turned slightly. "Do you think I don't know that?" "I think you forget sometimes." There wasn't anger in her voice, just honesty, the kind he wasn't used to. "You don't talk much about her mother," she added after a pause. He didn't look at her. "No." "Okay." It surprised him that she didn't press. Everyone else did. Family, reporters, even old friends, but not her. "Why do you do this?" he asked instead. She tilted her head. "You mean watch kids?" "Yeah, you have a degree in psychology. You could do other things." Emery shrugged, fingers curling around the mug in her hands. "I like the quiet parts, the small moments. With kids, you can see change. It's not always easy, but it's real." Nathan didn't respond, not at first. But as she turned to leave, he said her name softly, as if testing it for the first time. "Emery." She stopped. "Thank you." And that was the beginning of the crack, the moment where something in his voice lost its edge, where his world, structured, controlled, unyielding, let in something warmer. The rest would come slowly, as most real things do, but the shift had begun. And neither of them would ever be quite the same again. Emery arrived earlier now. She said it was to avoid traffic, but truthfully, it was because the mornings had started to feel less like work and more like something softer, more anchoring. Ava had started waking up excited to see her. The girl would greet her with sleepy curls and a stuffed bear named Lionel, rubbing her eyes and mumbling requests for waffles with strawberries, not blueberries. Nathan was always in the background in the mornings, sometimes on calls, sometimes just sitting at the dining table in a crisp shirt, reviewing contracts while coffee cooled at his elbow. He never asked for breakfast, but Emery started leaving a second cup of coffee anyway, just beside Ava's half-doodled placemat. He never said thank you out loud, but one morning she came in to find the mug washed and left to dry in the rack. He never done that before. The house wasn't cold exactly. It was clean, designed, filled with high-end furniture that whispered success and don't touch. But Emery had a way of slipping between those edges like water. She added things that didn't stand out at first. A string of handmade stars over Ava's bed, colorful magnets on the empty fridge, a habit of humming while folding blankets. Small changes, but Ava noticed, and slowly Nathan did too. It was 3 weeks in when the first real fracture appeared. Ava was at school. Emery was gathering laundry when she heard a sound she didn't recognize at first. Sharp, glass. Her heart stuttered and she followed it down the hallway past the half-closed door of Nathan's study. She knocked once instinctively. He didn't answer. She opened the door. The room was dim, curtains drawn against the morning sun. Papers were strewn across the floor and a crystal tumbler lay shattered by the wall. Nathan sat behind the desk, not looking at her. His tie was half untied, jaw tense. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said softly. "You didn't." She hesitated, then moved to the bookshelf, pulling a cloth from the drawer she'd seen Ava use for coloring. She knelt to pick up the glass. "Don't," he said, sharper than intended. She paused but didn't retreat. "I don't mind." He looked at her then, eyes shadowed with something heavier than stress. "I lost the Hennigan deal." Her hands stilled. "It was a 2-year play. I put people on it full time. Flew out 3 times this month alone, and I lost it." "I'm sorry." He let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "You don't have to be. You're not part of this world." "I watch your daughter," she said, rising slowly. "I'm part of your world." He said nothing for a long moment. "Does Ava know?" she asked. "No, and she won't. She doesn't need to worry about things like this." Emery moved closer, standing just beyond the edge of his desk. "Then maybe you shouldn't carry it all like this either." He looked up, something flickering behind his eyes, caution, surprise, maybe even a flash of shame. "It's not your job to care," he said, voice low. "I'm not here because of a job," she replied. "Not just that. It hung there between them, suspended and fragile. She didn't try to explain it further, and he didn't ask her to. That evening she cooked. It wasn't extravagant, just grilled chicken, roasted carrots with honey, and rice that didn't come from a takeout box. Ava set the table. Emery lit a small candle and placed it near the middle, smiling at the way the girl's eyes went wide with delight. Nathan arrived late, tie gone, shirt untucked. He blinked when he saw the table, then looked at Emery like she'd rewritten some rule he hadn't agreed to yet. "You don't have to stay," he said. "I want to." Ava tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, sit, I made the place cards." He did, slowly. Emery served without asking. They ate. They talked, mostly Ava, about school, a boy named Miles who said dinosaurs weren't real, a spelling quiz that had gone terribly wrong. Nathan was quiet at first, then less so. He asked questions. He laughed once, deep and sudden. Emery watched him soften like melting wax, tentative but real. After Ava went to bed, he walked her to the door. "I'm not used to this," he said, leaning against the frame. "What part?" "This people staying, people seeing." She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You're allowed to be seen." He didn't answer, but when she stepped into the hallway, he didn't close the door immediately. He watched her go, eyes not guarded this time but searching. 2 days later it rained. Ava's soccer practice was canceled, and Emery built a fort in the living room instead. Nathan arrived early, for once, and found the two of them under blankets with flashlights, reading The Secret Garden by glow light. "You're home," Ava said, breathless, crawling out from the cushions. Nathan knelt beside her, "Early today." She climbed into his lap without hesitation, and he looked at Emery over her shoulder. "I was thinking of taking her upstate this weekend," he said. "There's a place near Cold Spring, quiet." "Just the two of you?" Emery asked, careful with her tone. He hesitated. "I'd like you to come if you're free." She blinked. "I want it to feel like something more than a break from the office," he added, quieter. "And she talks about you." Emery nodded slowly. "Okay. Okay. I'll pack snacks." Nathan smiled. It was faint but real. Something had shifted. The careful distance they kept was shrinking, not by declarations, not by any sudden pull, but through Ava's laughter, through meals shared without obligation, through silence that felt less empty. Emery felt it in the way he looked at her now, not just with assessment but curiosity. Like maybe he'd been living in a house full of windows but never looked out. "And Nathan?" Nathan was beginning to realize that this woman who'd appeared without warning, who tied his daughter's shoes and never asked for more, she was quietly undoing something in him he hadn't even known was knotted. The weekend would change everything. But neither of them could see that yet. The cabin sat at the edge of a moss-draped clearing just where the trees started to thicken into forest. Nathan had inherited it years ago, a holdover from his father's rare attempts at family bonding, but hadn't visited since Ava was born. It smelled like cedar and stone and something old that didn't mind being remembered. The drive up had been long but unhurried. Ava dozed against Emery's shoulder for the last hour, her face soft with sleep. Nathan glanced at them in the rearview mirror more than once, an unreadable expression on his face, not wary, not quite protective either, maybe something closer to awe. Emery noticed. When they arrived, she stepped out and stretched, the mountain air washing over her skin. Nathan opened the trunk and unloaded bags with practiced efficiency, but she saw the way his hand lingered for a second on the duffel she had packed, just long enough for her to feel it. Inside, the cabin was simple. Worn leather armchairs, a stone fireplace, shelves lined with novels that smelled like pine. There were no screens, no sleek devices, just quiet, and Ava running barefoot through the open hallway, her laughter echoing off the wood. "I forgot how loud quiet could be," Nathan said as he brought in the last bag. "It's a good kind of loud," Emery replied, brushing a spiderweb from the corner of a windowsill. They cooked together that night. Not because it was planned, but because something unspoken made it feel natural. Emery chopped vegetables while Nathan grilled fish outside, Ava darting in and out with pine cones and sticks and treasures she insisted on showing them both. They ate by the fireplace. Nathan poured them each a glass of wine after Ava fell asleep, and for the first time since they met, he looked at her like someone not tethered to his title. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, watching the flames. "Do what?" "This, be here and not already somewhere else in my head." Emery set down her glass. "Then maybe it's not about knowing how, maybe it's just about staying long enough to let it feel different." He didn't answer right away, but he didn't retreat either. "I was married once," he said after a long pause. "Briefly, Ava was a surprise, a good one, but her mother and we were never built for the long haul. She left before Ava turned 2. It wasn't a fight, just absence." Emery listened without interrupting. She knew this wasn't a story he told often, maybe not at all. His voice was measured but not cold. There was no bitterness, just worn edges. "She sends postcards sometimes," he added. "From wherever she is, Ava thinks they're beautiful." "And you?" "I stopped opening them." A log shifted in the fireplace. Emery leaned forward, tucking her legs beneath her. "I grew up in a house where people left too," she said quietly, "but no one ever sent postcards." Nathan turned to her. "My mom stayed, but she didn't have enough in her to give, and my dad was always leaving in the name of work. I used to watch the other kids get picked up from school and wonder what it felt like to matter that way." "You're nothing like them." "Neither are you." He didn't look away. That night they didn't touch. They didn't sit too close or say too much. But when Emery stood to head to bed, Nathan surprised them both. "Stay." Her breath caught, but she stayed standing. "I don't mean here tonight," he clarified, voice rough. "I mean, in this, whatever this is becoming." Emery didn't give him the easy answer. She looked at him the way she always had, like she wasn't afraid to see the whole of him, sharp edges and all. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. And that was enough. The weekend passed like a dream without a timestamp. They hiked slowly. Emery carried snacks in her bag and taught Ava how to whistle through her fingers. Nathan watched them both with a kind of reverence, as if afraid too much joy might tip the balance. On the second night, a storm rolled in. They gathered by the window, watching the rain blur the world outside into streaks of silver. Ava fell asleep early. Emery and Nathan stayed up, a bottle of wine between them, laughter loosening their words. "I think you're more yourself here," she said. Nathan leaned back. "Or maybe I'm just less of what I pretend to be." He shifted closer, their knees brushing. This time he didn't move away. "You've been patient with me," he said, "more than I deserve." She tilted her head. "It's not about deserving." His fingers brushed hers. A quiet, almost imperceptible moment. "I keep thinking about the night I met you," he said. "I barely looked at you, you were just someone filling a need. And now, you're someone I can't stop seeing." It wasn't a line, it didn't even sound like something he'd meant to say out loud. But it landed. Emery stood, heart loud in her chest. She moved to the fireplace and crouched beside it, tucking a log deeper into the embers. She needed the moment, needed to breathe before something shifted again. Nathan joined her, kneeling beside her. "I don't want to scare you off," he said. She looked up. "You're not scary, Nathan. You're just used to being alone." He reached for her hand then, fully, deliberately. She didn't pull away. By the time they returned to the city, something unspoken had changed. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't obvious. But it lived in the silences between them, in the way Nathan lingered longer in doorways, in the way Emery caught herself looking for his reflection in windows. Ava seemed to notice too. She sat closer to Emery now at breakfast, but with a look of quiet pride, as if her two favorite people had finally found the same page. Then one Tuesday afternoon, it cracked. Nathan was late. Not the usual 20-minute delay. Hours, Emery called, texted, no answer. Ava sat on the window seat, watching every car that passed, her small hand clutching Lionel tight. It wasn't until 8:42 p.m. that the front door finally opened. Nathan looked wrecked. His tie was gone, his shirt stained at the collar, there was a cut on his cheek and a scuff on his hand. Ava ran to him. "Daddy." He hugged her tight, breathing hard against her hair. Emery stood frozen near the kitchen. "I'm okay," he said mostly to her. "Car accident. Someone ran a light. I'm fine." Emery walked toward him slowly. "Why didn't you call?" "I didn't want her to worry." "What about me?" He looked at her, really looked, and in that moment something in him cracked open. "I didn't know I could," he said. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Emery moved closer, cupping his face carefully, mindful of the bruise. "I see you," she whispered, "even when you forget how to be seen." And then quietly he kissed her. Not in desperation, not as apology, but as truth. It was soft, earnest, and real in the way few things in Nathan Drake's world had ever been. Neither of them said anything after. But everything had been said. And nothing would ever be quite the same again. The kiss didn't change everything overnight. It lived in the space between them like a memory neither one knew what to do with yet, hovering, warm, present. But the rhythm of their days continued. Emery still braided Ava's hair before school. Nathan still left early, came home late, but now sometimes he texted. Small things, a photo of Ava's drawing pinned beside his office lamp, a message asking what they wanted for dinner, once just a single word missed. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't a confession, but to Emery it was a door left open. And she stepped through. Ava, perceptive as always, began to treat her like someone permanent. She no longer asked when Emery was coming back. She just assumed she would. Her hand found Emery, instinctively in crowds. She reached for her first when she woke from a nightmare. She talked about school and friends and dreams with a kind of comfort that belonged only to people who had stopped bracing for goodbye. Nathan noticed. It was the small things that caught him. The way Ava's laughter had changed, less hesitant, more full. The way Emery made the penthouse feel less like a hotel and more like something lived in. There was a plant in the kitchen now, a scarf draped over the edge of the couch. A new recipe scribbled on the back of a takeout menu, pinned to the fridge like a family note. He'd always prided himself on control, order, containment. But with Emery things spilled, his thoughts, his attention, his plans. One evening, as Emery washed dishes and Ava built a puzzle on the floor, Nathan stood in the hallway and watched them. Neither noticed. It was one of those rare moments where he wasn't needed, and instead of feeling left out, he felt home. The word startled him. Later, after Ava had gone to sleep, he found Emery on the balcony again, wrapped in one of his sweaters. She hadn't asked, she didn't need to. "I was thinking," he said, stepping beside her. She smiled without looking at him. "That's dangerous. I might take some time off." She turned to him. "Really?" He nodded. "A few weeks. No calls, no travel, just here." He didn't say with you, but it was there, pressed into the air between them like a promise not yet spoken aloud. Emery reached for his hand. "I think she'd love that. I think I would too." He looked out at the city, then back at her. "I want to do this right, Emery, not just for Ava, for us. You don't have to know how yet." He squeezed her hand. "But I want to learn." That week they became something more intentional. Nathan took mornings slow. He lingered at breakfast, walked Ava to school when he could. He and Emery began sharing coffee on the balcony, talking about things that weren't tied to boardrooms or bedtime routines. Books, music, her childhood, his regrets. One evening they hosted Ava's friend and her mother for dinner. It was nothing extravagant: pasta, a salad, Ava's slightly lopsided cookies, but the laughter around the table felt like a life being built. Afterward, when the guests had gone, Emery leaned her head against Nathan's shoulder as they washed dishes side by side. "You're good at this," she said. "At dishes. At life when you let yourself be." Nathan didn't speak, but his smile lingered even after the last plate was dry. Then came the conference. Camille brought it up one morning in a half-apologetic tone. A 3-day event in San Diego, very high profile, very public. His name was on the docket already. "I can cancel," he told Emery later that day. "I don't want to undo all of this." Emery sat beside him on the couch. Ava was asleep upstairs, Rain tapped gently against the windows. "You don't have to choose between who you are and who you're becoming," she said. "Just remember what matters most when you're out there." He turned toward her. "You matter most." Emery's expression softened. "I know, just make sure you don't forget." Nathan left the next morning. 3 days, it should have been nothing. But sometimes distance doesn't measure in miles, it measures in silence. The first day he called, briefly, told Ava good night, spoke to Emery in a low voice, words warm but distracted. The second, just a text, a photo of the conference floor, a tired smile. The third, nothing. No call, no message. Emery didn't panic, not exactly, but a familiar ache crept into her chest, that old feeling of people disappearing when you start to believe they won't. She busied herself with Ava's day, baked muffins, organized bookshelves, even deep-cleaned the pantry. That night Ava sat on the edge of her bed, frowning. "Did he forget us?" "No," Emery said gently, brushing back her hair. "He's just busy." Ava's voice was small. Sometimes busy looks the same as gone. Emery felt something crack inside her. She kissed the girl's forehead. "He'll be home tomorrow." But even as she said it, something inside her pulled tight. When Nathan returned, the apartment was quiet. Emery was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. Ava was already asleep. He dropped his bag at the door and stepped inside. "I'm sorry," he said before anything else. She didn't turn around. "I got caught up in meetings, and then I missed your call and thought I'd wait until the morning, but—" "It's not about the call," she said quietly. He stepped closer. "Then what is it?" "It's the space," she said, laying the knife down. "The way it opened up so quickly. You were here and then you weren't, and we didn't know how to reach you." Nathan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't mean for it to feel like that." "I know, but it did." He stood behind her now, close, not touching. "I'm not used to being needed," he said, "and sometimes when I feel it, I retreat." Emery turned to face him, "And I'm not used to staying when that happens." They looked at each other, two people with different scars, standing at the edge of something fragile. "I want to get this right," he said. "Not perfectly, but honestly. I want you, not just here, not just for her, for me." Tears welled behind her eyes, unspilled. "Then don't disappear when things feel hard." "I won't." And this time he didn't kiss her as punctuation. He kissed her like a beginning. Later they sat on the couch, legs tangled, a blanket across their laps. Nathan rested his cheek against her temple. "She's always asking when you'll move in," he said. Emery smiled. "She has ideas." "She's not the only one." "I'm not rushing," she said gently. "I want this to grow slow and real." Nathan nodded. "Then let's grow it." In the soft hush of the apartment, with city lights blinking against the windows, Emery closed her eyes. Not because she was tired, but because, for once, she felt safe enough to rest. Spring settled over the city with a kind of gentleness it rarely afforded. The wind softened, sidewalks filled with laughter again, and tulips pushed up through the iron fences of the park across from the Calder and Blake building. For the first time in years, Nathan didn't feel the season pass him by. He saw it. He felt it. He saw it in the way Ava reached for Emery's hand on their morning walks. He felt it when he looked up from his desk to find a text from Emery, a picture of a pancake shaped like a bunny or a quick shot of Ava dancing in her socks on the hardwood floor. His days no longer felt like checklists. They felt like choices. He came home now, early. The penthouse no longer echoed. There were footsteps in the halls at all hours, blankets draped over the couch. Emery's sandals near the door, a rhythm that wasn't rushed or chaotic, it was full. She hadn't moved in, not officially. Her apartment still existed, but she was here most nights, brushing her teeth beside him, humming as she made tea, leaving books open on the arm of the chair. He stopped correcting her when she called it home in passing. Because it was. One Saturday morning, as sunlight stretched through the kitchen, Nathan stood at the stove flipping pancakes, real pancakes, not the boxed mix, and Emery leaned against the counter watching him. Ava was drawing on the floor, surrounded by colored pencils and a cat-shaped eraser she insisted brought her good luck. "You're better at this than you think," Emery said, sipping her coffee. "Cooking. All of it." Nathan glanced over his shoulder, the corner of his mouth lifting. "I had a good teacher." "Flattery won't save your pancakes." He flipped one with flair. "Watch me." They both laughed. Ava looked up from her drawing and smiled, then returned to coloring with a soft little hum. The moment was quiet, unremarkable in a way, but Nathan felt it like an anchor, like he'd landed somewhere without realizing he'd been drifting. He set down the spatula, moved toward Emery and kissed her cheek. She stilled slightly, still getting used to him being this open, but smiled as he pulled back. "You okay?" he asked. Emery studied him. "You look different lately, lighter." He nodded. "I feel it." And he did. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for the next thing to go wrong. He was in his life, not managing it from above. That afternoon, they went to the park. Ava wanted to fly her kite. Emery brought sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Nathan carried the picnic bag and let Ava lead them to the hill. Emery spread the blanket while he helped Ava untangle the string. It took them 3 tries, but the kite finally caught the wind and lifted, wobbling into the blue like a new promise. Nathan laughed as Ava shrieked and ran in circles. Emery watched them with a hand shading her eyes. When Nathan returned to the blanket, he sat beside her, the grass cool under his hands. "She's changed," Emery said, still watching Ava. "She feels safe," he replied, "because of you." She turned to him, "Because of us." He let the word settle. Us. There had been a time when that word had felt foreign, a risk, a loss of control, but now it felt earned. Ava came running back to them, breathless and pink-cheeked. "I'm hungry." Nathan opened the bag, perfect timing. They ate sandwiches and shared juice boxes. Emery lay back on the blanket, her head resting near Nathan's shoulder. He curled his fingers gently around hers. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, as Ava chased the kite again. "Dangerous," Emery teased, eyes closed. "I want you here." Her eyes fluttered open. "I am here." "No, I mean really here. I want you to move in, not just toothbrush in the bathroom here, not just weekends." Emery sat up slowly. "Nathan." "I know we said slow," he said, turning to face her fully. "And I meant it, but slow isn't the same as waiting for perfect, and this family we're building, it feels real, it feels right." She searched his eyes. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything." For a long moment, Emery didn't speak. The breeze lifted her hair. Children screamed in delight somewhere nearby. The kite dipped, then soared again. "I kept waiting for it to fall apart," she admitted, "because it always has." "It won't," he said simply. "How do you know?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Because I'll choose you every time, even when it's hard." She smiled then, eyes wet but bright. "Okay. Okay. I'll move in." He let out a slow breath and pulled her into him, resting his forehead against hers. Behind them, Ava cheered as the kite looped higher. Everything felt stretched open, full of air and light. That night after Ava fell asleep and the city folded into quiet, Emery sat in Nathan's lap on the balcony, wrapped in his sweater. They watched the lights blink below, her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever think about the day we met?" she asked. He kissed her hair. "Every time I see you." "What did you think of me?" "I thought you were just someone filling a role, efficient, ordinary." She laughed against his chest. "Charming." He tilted her chin gently, meeting her eyes. "But then you saw me," he said, "and everything changed." Emery didn't respond right away. She didn't need to. Instead, she kissed him, slow, unhurried, the way people do when they know they've finally stopped running. And for the first time in his adult life, Nathan Drake let himself stay, not as a CEO, not as a man managing every detail of his life, but as someone loved, as someone seen. In the warm hush of that high-rise home, where a little girl dreamed in the next room, where love had taken its time and built something real, He wrapped his arms around the woman who had changed everything. And he didn't let go.